Today we are going to discuss two very crucial topics which are related to CSIR NET examination. If you look at the first main topic of the CSIR NET examination, which generally refers to the molecular interactions relevant to biology, it encompasses these two topics, namely bioenergetics and enzymology. Now, why we have selected these two topics? The reason is that these two topics are first of all interrelated, and there are many questions which have been asked from these two topics as far as the CSIR NET examination concerned. Student is from any biological background, whether he is from biotechnology, microbiology, zoology, botany, or any other biological science, the students always study these two topics, and that's why it is very much required to give emphasis on these two topics as far as the CSIR NET examination is concerned. So I have divided this lecture into two different parts. In first part, we are going to discuss the bioenergetics, and in the second part, we are going to discuss the enzymology. Again, each part is divided into two further sections. In first section, we will have some basic introduction regarding the topic, and which is followed by some model questions which has been asked in the previous year examinations of CSIR NET or other competitive examination. So first of all, we will start with the bioenergetics. Now, what are the basic steps which are involved here? Here, we are going to focus on four different steps which are involved in the bioenergetics. We know that there are three different modes of energy generation in the living system. First is the oxidative phosphorylation, second is the substrate level phosphorylation, and third is the photophosphorylation. We know that glycolysis is the pathway which is the major energy generating pathway in the biological system, and it will lead to the formation of acetyl-CoA, which is the common intermediate, which is being formed even after the metabolism of carbohydrate, fatty acids and protein. So it is, you can say, the central metabolite to all the different biomolecules which are metabolizing within the cell. Now, this acetyl-CoA, it will enter into the Krebs cycle, generate the reducing power in the form of the NADH or FADH2, and this reducing power is being transferred to the various carriers of the electron transport system where the energy production takes place. Now here, the first step, that is the glycolysis, takes place in cytosol, while rest of the steps, they will take place in the mitochondria. So our main focus will be with respect to these four steps. What is the different type of intermediate which are involved in all these reactions? What will be the energetics of all these reactions? What will be the stoichiometry of all these different reactions which we are going to study? Now, if we talk about the glycolysis, the glucose is getting converted through various steps into 2-phosphoglyceraldehyde molecules. Now we know that there is a formation of the fructose 1,6-diphosphate, which will lead to the generation of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. And in these two reactions, it consumes 2 ATP as it has been shown in the slide. Now these 2 ATPs are being consumed by two reactions, as we know. First is by the hexokinase and second is by the phosphofructokinase. So here, this particular reaction up to the 2-phosphoglyceraldehyde is a step where ATP is being consumed. Now, from the 2-phosphoglyceraldehyde to pyruvate, you can see that the ATP is being produced. How the ATP is being produced? That is by the substrate level phosphorylation. There are two reactions in the glycolysis which will lead to the substrate level phosphorylation, and there is one reaction which will lead to generate the NADH. This NADH subsequently will enter into the TCA cycle and produces ATP. But if we restrict ourselves to glycolysis, then what will be the net outcome of the glycolysis? The net outcome of glycolysis will be 2 ATP. Now here we have to see that these 2 ATP are produced at the substrate level. Here there is no involvement of the electron transport chain, and that's why these 2 ATPs which are being produced, they are due to the substrate level phosphorylation. We have 2 NADH which is being produced, that is from glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to 1,3-diphosphoglyceric acid. This reaction, which is being catalyzed by phosphoglycerate dehydrogenase, requires NADH. So that's why it is being oxidized to 1,3-diphosphoglycerate, and we have the production of the NADH, and we have 2 molecules of pyruvate which is being formed. So this is the net outcome of the glycolysis. Okay. Now once the pyruvate is being formed, this pyruvate is converted into the acetyl-CoA, and this reaction is known as the transition reaction. Now this reaction generally takes place in the cytosol, and it is being performed by the multi-enzyme complex called as pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. Now as you can see in the slide that pyruvate is a 3-carbon compound. There is a decarboxylation reaction by the pyruvate decarboxylase of that particular enzyme system, which will remove one carbon dioxide from the carboxylic group of the pyruvate, and it will generate the acetyl-CoA. Now this is not the simple carboxylation, this is the oxidative carboxylation. It means along with the decarboxylation, oxidation also takes place, and that's why as a result the NAD plus is getting converted into NADH. There is a formation of the acetyl-CoA. There are two other enzymes which are involved in this pathway. First, as I have told you, pyruvate decarboxylase, pyruvate dehydrogenase, and acetyl transferase, which will transfer this coenzyme A moiety to the 2-carbon unit which is being liberated from the pyruvate, that is the acetate unit which is being liberated from the pyruvic acid. So we have ultimately the acetyl-CoA which is being formed from the pyruvate. So as I have told you earlier that this acetyl-CoA is the central metabolite of the metabolic pathway, even if it is a carbohydrate metabolism or fatty acid metabolism or a protein metabolism, the acetyl-CoA is being formed. Now this acetyl-CoA then it will enter into the mitochondria. Now directly see this acetyl-CoA cannot enter into the mitochondria as the mitochondrial membrane is impermeable to NADH as well as to the acetyl-CoA. So it combines with the oxalic acid and then it will enter into the mitochondrial membrane, and then it will enter into the mitochondria. Similarly, the NADH which is produced in the cytosol, it can also not directly enter into the mitochondria. So that's why you can see that the commencement of the citric acid cycle will take place only when this NADH and NAD and acetyl-CoA, they will enter into the mitochondria, and for them there are various shuttles which are being operated. For example, there are 2 different kinds of shuttles which is being operated in order to allow the passage of NADH into the mitochondria. The first one is the aspartate malate shuttle, and second one is the glycerol phosphate shuttle. The aspartate malate shuttle is a NAD dependent, while the glycerol phosphate shuttle is a FAD dependent, which will pave the way of NADH across the mitochondrial membrane to the mitochondria, because in order to form the energy, the ATP, the NADH must reach to the electron transport chain, which is present inside the mitochondria. So once it enters into the mitochondria, acetyl-CoA will enter into the mitochondria and become the part of the citric acid cycle. We have the formation of the citric acid followed by isocitrate, alpha ketoglutarate, succinyl coenzyme A, succinic acid, fumaric acid, malic acid, and again the oxaloacetic acid is regenerated. Now here we have to remember that for 2 acetyl CoA molecule which is being entering into the TCA cycle, there are 24 different ATP molecules which are being generated. We are going to look at the different stoichiometry and how much amount of ATP which is being produced at the end of the TCA cycle and the transition reaction. So that we are considering by considering the entry of this NADH and FADH2 which is being transferred to the electron transport chain. So if one molecule of acetyl CoA is entering into the TCA cycle, it will produce 12 molecules of ATPs, and if the 2 molecules will enter into the TCA cycle, it will produce 24 molecules of ATP. So in other words, we can say that 1 turn of TCA cycle, it will produce 12 molecules of ATPs. Okay. So let us analyze that what is the balance sheet for the transition reaction and the Krebs cycle. What was the input? The input was there were 2 pyruvate molecules which have been generated due to the glycolysis. We have 2 ADP and 2 inorganic phosphates. We have NAD plus and we have FAD. And the output is 6 carbon dioxides at the end of the Krebs cycle, 2 ATPs, 8 NADH and 2 FADH2. So if we analyze the complete balance sheet for the transition reaction and the Krebs cycle, we have total 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 2 ATP molecules, 8 NADH molecules and 2 FADH2 molecules. So it takes 2 complete cycles, 8 steps, each with an enzyme, in order to produce this much output at the end of the Krebs cycle and the transition reaction. Okay, now let us discuss certain model questions which has been asked in the previous year examination. Now this question is asked in one of the CSIR NET examination, and let us discuss this. The question is related to what we have studied earlier. The question is that at the end of the glycolysis, X is the net energy gain from the 1 glucose molecule via Y. But there is also an energy stored in the form of Z. Then which of the following option is true? I am again reading the question, that at the end of the glycolysis, X is the net energy gain from the 1 glucose molecule via Y. Okay, now here what can be the X? The X can be the ATP. That is for sure, because when we have discussed the glycolysis, we have discussed 2 different steps in which the ATP is being produced by the substrate level phosphorylation. One is the 1,3-diphosphoglycerate to 3-phosphoglycerate, where 1 ATP is being produced, and second is 2-phosphoenol pyruvate to pyruvate, where 1 ATP molecule is being produced. So 2 ATP molecules are being produced via which mechanism, that you have to identify. Now when we talk about these 2 ATP molecules, there is no involvement of electron transport chain. So that's why we can say that they are being produced by the substrate level phosphorylation, because oxidative phosphorylation will come into the picture only if there is an involvement of electron transport chain. So here either C or D option is correct, because oxidative phosphorylation can be nullified as there is no involvement of the electron transport chain here. So either C or D option may be correct. Now if you look at the C option, the Z that is the energy which is stored in the form which has been given, is in the form of the NADPH. Now we have seen the glycolysis, there is an involvement of NADH, not NADPH, and that's why in the glycolysis we have the involvement of NADH, which will store the in the form of the NADH. So the correct option will be D, that is 2 ATPs, Y, that is the mechanism by which it is being produced, that is substrate level phosphorylation, and Z is the NADH, that is the form in which the energy is being stored. So here if you look at this option, you may land up with the wrong answer if you consider the oxidative phosphorylation, because the last line which has been mentioned is in the form of the energy which is stored in the form of Z. So now if the energy is been transferred to the electron transport chain, it would have been converted into the ATP, but that is not the case here. It has been strictly mentioned that the energy is being stored in the form of Z. So this Z is nothing but the NADH. So the correct option, the correct answer will be D, that is 2 ATPs molecules corresponding to X. The mechanism by which these ATP molecules are produced is the substrate level phosphorylation corresponding to Y, and NADH, which is corresponding to Z, the form in which the energy is being stored. Okay. Now there are several questions which are being asked on the structure of the different metabolites and what is the channelization of the different carbon atoms as the pathway proceeds. So one of such question has been asked over here. The question is that if 32 phosphorus, which is the radioactive form of the phosphorus, which is inorganic phosphorus, which is being labeled, and when it was introduced to the RBCs undergoing glycolysis, then which of the following glycolytic intermediate will be radio labeled? Now in this question, you have to read the first line very carefully. It has been mentioned that if the radio labeled phosphorus is in terms of the inorganic phosphate. Here they have not mentioned anything about the source of the phosphate which is organic in nature. So this thing you have to keep into your mind when you are going to address such type of question. So different options are being given that which of the following intermediate will be labeled with the phosphate. Fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Now this is not possible because in glycolysis we know that from fructose 6-phosphate, fructose 1,6-bisphosphate is being formed by the phosphofructokinase enzyme. And this phosphofructokinase enzyme, it requires ATP. It does not require inorganic form of the phosphate, but it requires ATP. The another option is 1,3-diphosphoglycerate. Now this is also not possible because from the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, when there is a formation of 1,3-diphosphoglycerate during the glycolysis, here it is an oxidation reaction, and along with that the inorganic phosphate will phosphorylate the carboxyl moiety at the first position, which is being formed from the aldehyde moiety of the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So here the second option is also not can be considered, we can consider, and the third one is the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, which is being formed from the dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Now we know that fructose 1,6-biphosphate by the aldolase is cleaved into the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and fructose 1,6-diphosphate, and that will again isomerize in order to form 2 molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So that option can also not be considered. Now if we look at the option D, that is glucose 6-phosphate, this is obviously not be one of the correct option because the glucose 6-phosphate is being formed by the enzyme hexokinase, and this hexokinase enzyme requires ATP. So there is no question of using inorganic phosphate in order to phosphorylate the glucose. So that's why here the correct answer will be 1,3-diphosphoglyceric acid, or you can say 1,3-diphosphoglycerate, which is being formed from the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate by the oxidation in order to form the 1,3-diphosphoglycerate. After the oxidation, the aldehyde group of the glyceraldehyde will be getting converted into the carboxylic group, and this is being phosphorylated. So here, since there is no involvement of ATP, the label will go into the first position of 1,3-diphosphoglycerate. They can further complicate this question. They may give two different options with respect to 1,3-diphosphoglycerate, and they may ask you that out of 1 and 3, which particular phosphate will show the radio label. So the phosphate group which is present at third position reflects the phosphate group which is present in the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate itself, and the first phosphate which is being incorporated, that is to the carboxyl group which is present, which is being oxidized at the first position of 1,3-diphosphoglycerate from the aldehyde group of the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So this question can also be further complicated, that out of 1 and 3, because since there are two phosphate group, which will be radio labeled? First carbon will be radio labeled or the third carbon will be radio labeled? So in that case, the correct answer will be that first carbon will be radio labeled, because it is being oxidized and phosphorylated by the inorganic phosphate, and that's why the label will be incorporated at the first carbon of 1,3-diphosphoglyceric acid. Now let us look at one more model question related to this, that if 1 mole of acetyl coenzyme A is labeled with radioactive carbon at both the carbon positions, at the acetate moiety goes through 1 ton of TCA cycle, how many moles of radio-labeled carbon dioxide will be produced? Now here you should know what are the different intermediates which are being involved in the TCA cycle, and what are those steps in which the carbon dioxide is being removed during the TCA cycle. Not only that, when the acetyl CoA will enter into the TCA cycle, it represents which carbon in those intermediates, and the carbon dioxide which is being liberated during the TCA cycle represents which carboxylic acid. Now you remember that when there is a removal of the carbon dioxide in any biosynthetic or any metabolic pathway, there is always a reflection of the presence of carboxyl group which is present in that particular intermediate. So one thing is sure, that this carbon dioxide represents the carboxyl group of any of the TCA cycle intermediate which are involved here. Now we know the first step of the TCA cycle, that there is a condensation between the acetyl CoA and oxaloacetate in order to form the aconitate and isocitrate, and then the isocitrate will get converted into alpha ketogluteric acid. Now the conversion of alpha ketogluteric acid to isocitric acid is a oxidative decarboxylation reaction, and that's why one carbon dioxide will be removed from the isocitrate and alpha Kg is being formed, and this alpha Kg will get converted into the succinyl CoA. Again it is a oxidative decarboxylation, and we have the removal of the carbon dioxide. So that's why these are the two steps where carbon dioxide is being removed. Now let us go to the paper and see that which are the different moieties of acetyl CoA which becomes the part of the different intermediates of the TCA cycle, and which particular moiety is corresponding to the carbon dioxide in this particular metabolic pathway. So I will show you on the paper that how this can be done. Now this is the oxaloacetic acid, and this will first of all combine in order to form aconitate, and this aconitate will get converted into isocitrate. Isocitrate will get converted into alpha Kg. Now here there is a removal of one carbon dioxide, and this alpha Kg will get converted into succinyl coenzyme A, and here there is a removal of one carbon dioxide moiety. So there are two different steps in the TCA cycle where you will have the removal of the carbon dioxide. So one is here and one is here, because both these steps are the oxidative decarboxylation steps. Now if we look at the isocitric acid, it is a 6 carbon acid having 3 carboxylic groups. Now out of this you can say that 2 carboxylic group is from the oxaloacetic acid, and because of that reason what will happen, that when it will undergo removal of the carbon dioxide, it will remove one of the carboxylic group which is a part of the oxaloacetic acid and not the acetyl CoA. Now if you remember the question, in question we have labeled with the 14C the acetyl CoA and not the oxaloacetic acid. So when another carbon dioxide molecule will be removed, that may be the alpha carbon group of the oxaloacetic acid, and that's why both this carbon dioxide which is being removed, they do not represent the carbon which is present in the acetyl CoA. So that's why when we analyze the cell-free extract for the 14CO2, none of the carbon dioxide which is being liberated at the end of the TCA cycle will show the radio label. So that's why let us go to the screen again, let us go to the slide again, and let us analyze the option now, that what are the different options which has been given. So the option, let us now analyze the options, which are the different options which has been given for this particular model question. So the options are given, they are option A is 0, option B is 1, option C is 2, and option D is 4. So here the correct answer will be A, that is option A, that will be 0, because none of the carbon dioxide which is being liberated will represent the acetyl CoA moiety, because both of the carbon dioxide represent the carboxylic group of the other organic acids which are present in the TCA cycle. So that's why the answer for this question will be A, that will be 0. Let us analyze one more model question, that conversion of glucose to glucose 6-phosphate requires ATP. Yet critically ill patients are given glucose solution intravenously and not glucose 6-phosphate. Why? Because different options are given. Glucose 6-phosphate is degraded very fast in the blood. Commercial preparation of glucose 6-phosphate is toxic because of the high cost, and cells cannot take up the glucose 6-phosphate. Now if you remember where the glycolysis takes place, where the glucose 6-phosphate is formed, the glucose 6-phosphate is formed in the cytosol of the cell. So it has to form the glucose 6-phosphate, it has to enter inside the cell, and if, because the enzyme responsible for the phosphorylation of the glucose, they are present inside the cell. So here the glucose to glucose 6-phosphate conversion takes place inside the cell. So cells cannot directly take up the glucose 6-phosphate. The transport system for the glucose is not such that it will directly take up the glucose 6-phosphate. High cost is not the option which is acceptable, because there is nothing to do with the cost as far as the phosphorylation is concerned. Commercial preparation of G6P is toxic is also not the valid reason, and G6P is degraded very fast in the blood is also not the correct option, because unless until it is in the form of the pure glucose, it will be taken up even by the RBCs. So that's why, since cell cannot take up the glucose 6-phosphate, we know that glucose is transported into the cell by active transport. We know about the sodium potassium pump, how it works and how the glucose is being taken up. Once it is being taken up, then it is getting phosphorylated, because the hexokinase enzyme is present inside the cell, inside the within the cell in the cytosol, and that's why it will be able to phosphorylate the glucose into the glucose 6-phosphate. So the correct option will be D, that is cells cannot take up the glucose 6-phosphate. Okay, now let us go to the electron transport system. We have discussed about the glycolysis, we have discussed about the transition step, and we have discussed about the TCA cycle. Now what is the net outcome? Because the electron transport system will depend upon the amount of reducing power which is generated at the end of all these reactions. So as we have discussed earlier, that when each glucose molecule will be metabolized, when it will undergo glycolysis, the net outcome will be 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 10 molecules of NADH, 2 molecules of FADH2 and 4 molecules of ATP, which are being produced by the substrate level phosphorylation. Now this 10 NADH and 2 FADH2, they will be used to make ATP when they will transfer their reducing equivalents to the different carriers of the electron transport chain. Now this is the diagram of the various complexes which are involved in the electron transport chain. There are 4 different complexes. Complex 1, which is nothing but the NADH dehydrogenase complex. Complex 2, that is succinate dehydrogenase. Complex 3 and complex 4, that is the cytochrome oxidase. Complex 3 is a cytochrome BC1 reductase complex. So there are 4 different complexes through which the electrons are being transferred from NADH to the terminal electron acceptor oxygen. Now if we look at the arrangement of all these different complexes and the different carriers which are a part of these complexes, they are arranged in the reducing order, or you can say the ascending order of their redox potential, because the electrons which are present in the reducing equivalents will be transferred to all these carriers from the intermediate which is having lower redox potential to the intermediate which is having the higher redox potential. So that's why the flow of the electron through all these different carrier is fixed, that it will go from NADH to complex 1, complex 2, complex 3 and then to the complex 4. However, the FADH2 will directly give their electrons to the complex 2, that is succinate dehydrogenase, to the coenzyme Q or the ubiquinone. Now when the electron flow takes place through the different carriers of the electron transport chain, it will lead to the generation of 2 different types of gradient. You are aware with the Peter-Michel theory of the generation of the proton motive force. Now due to the electron, there is a migration of the proton from the inner membrane space to the mitochondrial matrix. Now if we analyze this complex wise, in that case, when NADH will transfer its electron to the NADH dehydrogenase, that is the complex number 1, during the transfer of the electrons in the complex number 1, 4 protons are being pumped out. When through ubiquinone Q, the complex 2 transfer its electron to the complex 3, and from the complex 1 through ubiquinone Q, when the electrons are being transferred to the complex 3, during the transfer of the complex 3, 2 protons are being pumped out from the inner mitochondrial membrane space to the matrix. Now the reason is that 2 different protons which are being pumped out, or 2 different electrons which are being moving inside the complex 3, they are being used to regenerate the ubiquinone, which can be the part of the Q cycle which is taking place inside the complex 3. So here what will happen, that the electron which is being collected by the complex 1 and complex 2 by the ubiquinone will be given to the complex 3, and only 2 electrons out of the 4 electron given to the complex 3 will be moved towards the complex 4, and rest of the electron will be used for the Q cycle, where they will generate the ubiquinone for the next cycle of electron transport to happen. So because of this reason, only 2 protons are being pumped out from the complex 3. Now here you can see that this coenzyme Q is a entity of the electron transport chain which is movable. It can move from one place to another. Rest of the complexes or rest of the component of the electron transport chain are fixed, but Q is a movable entity inside the mitochondrial membrane because of the isoprenoid side chain which it possesses. Now due to the isoprenoid side chain, it can travel within the mitochondrial membrane from complex 1 to complex 3 and transfer the electrons. So when it will transfer the electron which are transferring in the complex 3, out of them 2 electron, or you can say the pair of electron, are transferred to the cytochrome C. Now again cytochrome C is a movable entity. It will give their electrons to the complex 4, which is nothing but the cytochrome oxidase, which will liberate 4 protons, which will allow the passage of 4 different protons from the inner mitochondrial membrane space to the matrix. So as a result, we will have the generation of 2 different types of gradient. One is the gradient of proton across the membrane, inner mitochondrial membrane, that is delta pH, and second is the separation of the charge which is taking place with respect to the inner mitochondrial membrane, which will lead to the generation of electrochemical gradient, which can be symbolized as a delta psi. So if we look at the electron transfer in these different complexes in the electron transport chain, there are total 10 protons which are being pumped out from the inner mitochondrial membrane to the matrix. When NADH completely transfer its electrons to the terminal electron acceptor oxygen, and when this proton, they will enter through the F0 subunit of the F0 F1 ATPase again into the inner mitochondrial membrane space. At that point of time, we will have the generation of the ATP. So here F0 is acting as a proton channel, which will allow the passage of protons through its different subunits, especially the C subunit, which will allow the rotation of the gamma subunit, over which alpha, 3 alpha and 3 beta subunits are present, and rotation of this will allow the formation of the ATP. So we are aware with the Paul Boyer theory of rotational catalysis, which will allow the generation of the ATP at this particular stage. Now the question is that how much proton is required to be pumped out from the matrix again to the inner mitochondrial membrane space in order to generate the ATP. Now for this, it has been observed that for 1 molecule of ATP is being generated when 4 protons are being pumped out. The reason is that these are the different carriers transferring the electrons to the terminal electron acceptor, and you can see that they are arranged as per the ascending order of their redox potential, because the electron is transferred from the lower redox potential to higher redox potential. Now when we are talking about this, that when how many protons are being pumped out. Now for one molecule of ATP which is required to synthesize, it pumps 4 protons. Now you can see that there are certain subunits which are present on the F0 F1 ATPase, especially on the F1 ATPase. The alpha 3 and beta 3 subunit, they are involved in the ATP synthesis. The beta subunit, it has 3 different configuration: beta ATP, beta ADP and beta MT. And in order to during the movement of the proton through the F0, that is the proton channel, it will rotate, and this rotation will be such that each beta subunit will pass through all these 3 configurations, that is beta MT, beta ADP and beta ATP. So beta ATP configuration is such that when the beta subunit will acquire this configuration, it will remove the ATP into the mitochondrial matrix. So during this reaction, the ATP which is being formed, it requires 3 protons. It means for the beta subunit to pass through each different configuration, it requires 1 proton. So that's why in order to pass through 3 different combinations, 3 different configurations, it requires 3 protons. And 1 proton is required to carry the inorganic phosphate from the cytosol or from the cytosol of the cell to the mitochondria, so that the ADP can be phosphorylated at the beta ATP site of the beta subunit of the F0 F1 ATPase. So that's why in order to synthesize 1 molecule of ATP, you required 4 protons. So what is the net yield for the electron transport? Now electron transport system, we have total 28 ATPs which are being generated. Here we are not considering those ATPs which are synthesized by the substrate level phosphorylation. If you recall the previous slide, we have discussed that we have total 10 NADH which is being produced by the transition step and by the Krebs cycle and by the glycolysis. In the glycolysis, the reaction glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to 1,3-diphosphoglycerate, it will produce 2 NADH. The reaction, that is isocitrate to alpha ketoglutarate, will produce another 2 NADH. Alpha ketoglutarate to succinyl CoA will produce another 2 NADH. The malate to oxaloacetate will produce 2 more NADH, and acetyl CoA to pyruvate will also pyruvate to acetyl CoA will also produce 2 more NADH. So total 10 NADH which is being produced. Now we have discussed just now that when 1 NADH, 1 mole of NADH, when they will transfer their electrons to the terminal electron acceptor, we will have the formation, or we will have 10 protons which are being pumped out from the matrix to the inner mitochondrial membrane space. Now, as we have discussed earlier, that since 4 protons are required to synthesize 1 ATP, since there are 10 NADH which is being formed, 10 protons which is being pumped out, 1 molecule of NADH will produce 2.5 molecule of ATPs. Now when you multiply this 2.5 with the 10 molecules of NADH, your answer will be 28. So this 28 is from the 10 different molecule of NADH and 1 molecule of 2 molecules of FADH2 which is being produced. So 10 NAD will produce 25 molecules of ATP, and 2 FADH, they will produce 3 molecules of ATP. So total will be 25 plus 3, that is equal to 28 as shown in the slide. Now why FADH will produce 3 ATP? Because it is bypassing the complex 1 and directly giving its electrons to the ubiquinone. So that's why it is bypassing the complex 2, directly giving the electrons to the ubiquinone, which is being transferred to the complex 3. So that's why whatever the electron transfer or the proton which is being pumped out from complex 1 will not be considered when FADH2 or the FADH is transferring its reducing equivalent to the terminal electron acceptor oxygen. So in that case we have to consider only 6 protons. Now as per our equation, that if 1 ATP required 4 proton, how many ATPs will be produced by the 6 protons? And the answer will be 1.5. So 1.5 multiplied by 2, that corresponds to 3. So 10 NADH will produce 25 ATPs and 2 FADH2 will produce 3 ATPs. So that's why the total comes to 28. 2 ATPs are produced during the citric acid cycle by substrate level phosphorylation. Now we know that succinyl-CoA to succinate reaction, in the succinyl-CoA there is a thiol-ester bond, there is a covalent linkage and it is a high energy linkage. So when this linkage is broken down, the GTP is first formed and from the GTP is ATP is formed. So when there are 2 molecules of acetyl-CoA entering into the TCA cycle, we will have the formation of 2 ATPs through the citric acid cycle. Through the glycolysis, again we have 2 ATPs for the 2 substrate level phosphorylation. Actually there are 4 ATPs, but 2 ATPs are being utilized for the phosphorylation of glucose and fructose 6-phosphate. So that we have to subtract, and that's why the net ATP which are being produced from the glycolysis is 2. So the subtotal will be 28 from the electron transport chain, 2 by the substrate level phosphorylation of citric acid cycle, 2 by the glycolysis. So there will be subtotal of 32 molecules of ATPs. Now we have to consider here, as I have told you earlier, that NADH is generally impermeable to the mitochondrial membrane. It is to be transported into the mitochondria. And this is being done by the shuttle system, malate aspartate shuttle or the glycerol phosphate shuttle, which consumes 2 ATPs. So that's why the total yield of the ATP at the end of the glycolysis, including the electron transport chain, will be 30. It may be a 32 depending upon the kind of the shuttle which is being operated. If it is a malate aspartate shuttle, then it is a NAD dependent shuttle, and that's why you have the formation of the 30 ATPs. And if it is a glycerol phosphate shuttle, which is a FADH2 dependent shuttle, and in that case we have the 32 molecules of ATP. So in short we can say that when 1 mole of glucose is completely oxidized, we have either 30 or 32 molecules of ATP which is being formed. So the net yield of ATP at the end of 1 molecule of glucose which is being metabolized, which is being oxidized, either 30 or 32 depending upon the kind of the shuttle operated. Okay. Now let us discuss certain model questions related to this particular topic. Injection of the dinitrophenol into a rat causes increase in the body temperature because it is, options are given, an inhibitor of mitochondrial ATPase, blocks the electron transport chain, inhibits succinate dehydrogenase, uncouples electron transport from the oxidative phosphorylation. Now if you look at the any standard biochemistry book, the dinitrophenol act as a uncoupler. It is neither directly binding to the ATPase nor it is inhibiting the any of the carrier of the electron transport chain. It is uncoupling the electron transport which is coupled with the oxidative phosphorylation. So in the presence of the dinitrophenol, you will have the electron transport, but there is no formation of the ATP. So due to the electron transport, whatever the energy which will be generated, that energy will be generated in the form of heat, and that's why there is a increase in the body temperature, because that much amount of energy the organism is unable to convert into the ATP because of the presence of the dinitrophenol, which is uncoupling the electron transport chain from the oxidative phosphorylation. So as a result, the correct answer will be the D, that is here it is uncouples the electron transport from the oxidative phosphorylation. So the correct answer will be that it acts as an uncoupler and it uncouples electron transport from the oxidative phosphorylation. The second model question, that which of the following statement is correct as far as the electron transport chains is concerned. Four different options are given. Electron transport generates proton motive force. Proton motive force is due to the voltage gradient across the membrane. Total 10 protons are translocated from the matrix to inner mitochondrial membrane space per pair of electron transfer to O2. Now all these statements are correct, because we know that when electrons are transported through the various carrier, it generates the proton motive force. We know the Peter-Michel theory. The proton motive force is also due to the voltage gradient. We have discussed that there is a separation of charge also across the membrane, and it will generate the electrochemical gradient across the membrane. Total 10 protons are being pumped out when NADH will transfer the electrons completely to the terminal electron acceptor oxygen. We have discussed that from the complex 1 there are 4 protons which are being pumped out. From the complex 3 there are 2 protons which are being pumped out, and from the complex 4 protons are being pumped out. So total 4 plus 2 plus 4, that is equal to 10 protons are being pumped out from the inner mitochondrial membrane space, and that's why it will C is also the correct statement. So the correct answer will be D, that all the statements given above are correct as far as the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation is concerned. Model question. One more model question related to this, that some of the free energy released in the mitochondrial electron transport chain can be harnessed to the formation of ATP. How many molecules of ATP can be formed per mole per electron is transferred from NADH? Now if you recall again the electron transport chain different components, we have discussed the NADH will transfer the electrons to the complex 1, then to the complex 3, and then to the complex 4, and then to the terminal electron acceptor oxygen. So NADH is not bypassing any of the complex during its transfer of electron to the terminal electron acceptor, and as a result it will be having the advantage of all the protons which are being pumped out from the inner mitochondrial membrane to the matrix. So since we know that 4 protons are required to synthesize 1 ATP and 10 protons are being pumped out when NADH will transfer its electron to the oxygen, the answer will be D, that is 2.5. If you look at the old biochemistry book, they will write 3 in case of the NADH, and they might have mentioned 2 in case of the FADH2. But that 3 and 2 just represents the various location where the ATP is being produced. It does not represent the number of ATPs which is being produced. For that, you have to find out that how much amount of free energy is responsible to pump out the number of protons from the inner mitochondrial membrane space to the matrix. So that's why nowadays all the calculations regarding the bioenergetics are being considered by calculating 2.5 ATPs which are being generated per mole pair of NADH and 1.5 ATPs with respect to the FADH2. One more question. Submitochondrial particles are isolated by sonication of intact mitochondria and supplied with external NADH. According to the chemiosmotic theory, which of the following statement will be correct? The answer option A is ATP will be made inside the particle, NADH will become reduced, pH will increased inside, pH will decreased inside. Now, as we have discussed the mechanism of the electron transport through the various components, ATP will be made inside the particle is not possible because ATP is made in the matrix. NADH will become reduced is also not possible because on the contrary NADH is being oxidized by giving the electron to the different carriers. pH will increase inside is also not possible because protons are entering inside. So when the protons are entering inside, it will not increase the pH but it will decrease the pH, and that's why the correct answer will be D, that they are going to decrease the pH. So the correct option will be D, that pH will decrease inside the mitochondrion particle, as the transfer of electron will pave the way of protons from the matrix to the inner mitochondrial membrane space, which will reduce the pH. So the correct option will be D, that is pH will be decreased inside the mitochondrion particle. Enzymology. Now this portion we will discuss in the next session.